All right, let's talk about something that sounds like pure science fiction. Transparent wood. Seriously, we're gonna follow this one scientist's quest to make it, and trust me, it's a wild ride. We're talking explosive chemistry, tons of frustrating failures, but also some really brilliant breakthroughs.
So where does a journey like this even start? Well, in this case, it was watching someone else try and fail. The scientists saw this video of an attempt that just didn't work out, mostly because they were using the wrong stuff and, a dodgy scientific paper. So that basically threw down the gauntlet. The big question became, what if you did it right? What if you followed the real instructions to the letter?
So the goal was set. Simple, right? But definitely not easy. The very first step? A scavenger hunt. He had to find the exact type of wood the paper called for, basswood from one specific company, and all the correct chemicals. No shortcuts, no substitutions. This was all about pure replication, to give this thing the best possible shot at actually working.
Okay, but wait. Before you can make wood transparent, you kind of have to ask a basic question. What is wood really? Like, what are we even trying to change here? To make it see-through, we've got to understand why it's, well, not see-through in the first place.
And the answer isn't just, well, because it's a tree. It's way cooler than that. It all comes down to its microscopic structure. It's this super dense, super complex framework of natural polymers, and their whole job is basically to scatter light all over the place. If you zoom way in, you'll see wood is made of three main things. You've got cellulose and hemicellulose. Think of those as the long, strong fibers, the scaffolding. But then there's the third piece of the puzzle, and this is the one we really care about. This is our target. It's called lignin.
So lignin, what is it? It's basically the biological glue. It's the stuff that fills in all the gaps, gives the wood its strength, its rigidity, and its color. It's the thing blocking the light. So the mission becomes crystal clear, right? If you want to make wood transparent, you've got to get rid of the lignin. That's step one.
All right, so now we know our target. Let's get to the fun part, the chemical gauntlet. This is where we're going to try and fundamentally change this piece of wood, turning it from a solid block into this porous white skeleton.
Now, if you just read the paper, the procedure sounds, pretty straightforward. You boil the wood in a chemical soup to dissolve that lignin, give it a good wash, and then bleach out any leftover color with some hydrogen peroxide. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, well, as anyone who's ever done an experiment knows, the plan and reality are two very different things. And in this case, the chemistry had other plans. Let's just say it didn't go quite as smoothly as hoped. Instead of a nice, gentle simmer, the sodium hydroxide solution went nuts, boiling over like crazy. And then later, when the hydrogen peroxide went in, whoa, it set off this runaway reaction, foaming up so violently it almost blew the top off the container. This was not some calm, controlled lab procedure. It was basically a fight to stop the whole thing from self-destructing.
And this is where the real science happens, right? It's that first moment of panic where you have to think on your feet. The solution? Get it off the heat, fast. Let everything calm down. And then, for the next step, they learn their lesson and switch to a way more diluted peroxide solution just to tame that crazy reaction.
Okay, so mission accomplished on phase 1. The lignin is gone, the wood is bleached this spooky ghost white color. But now comes the next big challenge. How do you get a clear epoxy resin into that super fragile porous skeleton? And believe me, this is where the real trial and error kicked in.
It was just one problem after another. Every time they tried to pull a vacuum to suck the epoxy in, something went wrong. The first piece? It cracked because it didn't get filled all the way. The next one came out all hazy and torn up. They even tried a smaller vacuum chamber, and somehow that made it even worse. At this point, it was pretty clear that just one little tweak wasn't going to fix it. The whole setup was wrong. The pump wasn't strong enough, the chamber was way too big, and the wood itself, it was just too thick to get the epoxy all the way through.
But this is what science is all about, right? Every failure teaches you something. So they made 4 huge changes. They got a brand new, much more powerful vacuum pump. They found a much smaller, more efficient chamber. They painstakingly sliced the wood pieces way thinner, down to just 2 millimeters. And they started using a silicone mold to keep everything in place while it cured.
And the difference was, wow, just night and day. The new setup pulled a killer vacuum almost instantly. And you could literally see it working, this crazy storm of bubbles as all the air and leftover solvent got ripped out of the wood. That's what you want to see. It meant the epoxy could finally rush in and fill everything up. This was it. This was the right way to do it.
So, let's recap.
We've had violent chemistry, a bunch of failed attempts, some really clever breakthroughs, but what about the end result? Did it actually work? And, why should we even care? And the answer is yes. Finally, a genuine success. A piece of wood. Well, it's a wood epoxy composite now. That was so transparent, you could put it on a piece of paper and read the words right through it. That sci-fi idea was now a real thing, sitting right there on the lab bench.
But, science is never that easy. The quest isn't totally over. Even the best piece had its problems. As the epoxy cured, the whole thing started to warp and curve. And sometimes, days later, the internal stress would just cause it to crack. So making a large, perfectly flat, stable piece, that's the next big hurdle.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a lot of trouble for a little see-through piece of wood. What's the big deal? Well, it really boils down to 3 huge reasons why this matters.
First off, this isn't just some cool party trick. What you're making here is a material that has the strength of wood, but the transparency of glass or plastic. And second, and this is huge, it's made from a totally renewable resource. It's made from trees. You put those 2 things together, and you're looking at a potential game-changing supermaterial.
Right now, the biggest thing holding this back is scale. I mean, think about it. Getting that epoxy to perfectly fill a tiny 2mm thick piece is already super hard. Now imagine trying to do that for a big sheet, something you could use for a window or a building panel. That's a whole different level of engineering problem.
And all of this whole journey, from a failed video to a real-life success, it leaves us with this one incredible question to think about. Could we be heading towards a future where the windows in our homes, the strong, clear materials we build our world with, aren't made from sand or oil, but are actually grown from trees?